Welcome to the Planning Committee. In the interest of safety, if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lift. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. And where should we, Councillor Vernon Jackson, where should we congregate?
Always with Queen Victoria.
Thank you. For those of you who have not attended this committee before, I will explain the running order for this afternoon. After committee members have declared their interest and agreed the minutes of the previous meeting, I will announce each item and ask those of you who are here to make a deputation to come and sit at the table. After the planning officer has made the presentation for the application, individual deputies will have 6 minutes to express their views, and joint deputies will have 12 minutes between them to make their views known. After which you'll take no further part in the proceedings, unless we need to ask a question to clarify a statement that has been made. Members will then ask questions, make comments, and the decision on the application will be made. Both members of the committee and members of the public are reminded of the need to consider material planning matters and not to refer to any personal information about other members of the public. I shall certainly try and shut you up if you do. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed from a camera at a fixed location at the back of the meeting room and will be recorded on the Council's website. The camera will mainly capture the backs of those making deputations, but there will also be some footage of those making deputations as they approach and leave the table where the microphones are located, and of people entering or leaving the room whilst the meeting is in progress. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Finally, may I ask everyone to use the microphones provided when they are speaking. Before we come to the agenda, I hope all members will have read the email concerning protocol which was sent out by myself and Mr. Maguire at 9 o'clock this morning. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Councillor Udy and Councillor Atkins.
Councillor Jones?
Thank you very much. Councillor Stubbs is en route, but has been delayed because there was a delivery that was delayed getting to him, so he'll be here shortly.
Right. Yes, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll notice the haircut since yesterday. Nice and sharp today. So, just to let you know that unfortunately I've got to leave about 2 or 2:15 as I've got a meeting at home with solicitors and so on.
Right. Yes, Councillor Smythe.
I'm sorry, but I've been at other meetings this morning. I don't think I'm alone in not having read the 9 o'clock.
Right. Well, in simple terms, it is a matter of showing normal courtesy to the chair. It is also a matter of not giving the impression to people that you are in any way biased by stating which ward you represent. Anything else will come across a little later. So we have apologies. Declarations of members' interests. Councillor Pitt. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
I understand that on item 5, 3 Burcote Drive, both the leader and I will need to excuse ourselves because of our connection to the council officer in the application. That's the advice that I've had from the planning solicitor Kieran Laven this morning. I understand that doesn't affect any other members of the committee. However, in practicality terms, since Councillor Hunt is only here for an hour and we currently are low on numbers, I'm just wondering whether it might be necessary to adjust the order so that the item can be heard.
Your brilliance is mirrored by mine on that matter. Councillor Donna Jones.
Well, I'm reviewing my position. I just had an approach from the solicitor about 3 Burcote Drive, item 9, and when it was raised with me that I may have a declaration, I didn't think I did, because I said, well, you know, this is someone I know through being a staff member of the council and not in a personal capacity. So she did her job, she worked for me, but that's as far as it goes. But as my colleagues are declaring an interest, then actually probably as I appointed her into her role, which was a point that the solicitor made to me, I think if my colleagues are declaring an interest on that basis, then probably I should too. Whether or not you're going to be quorate, I don't know. But
I checked with Kieran this morning and that was the case.
you will or you won't. Do you think
Councillor Vernon-Jackson?
I have an interest in declaring that in item 5, which is personal but prejudicial, and therefore I shall leave the room. Okay, application 5.
Sorry.
Could I seek advice in? I mean,
You're not going to tell us, are you?
no. So the person concerned, I understand. I have no connection with her. I don't go out for drinks. Am I all right?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah. If you took it first, we might be able to sort it.
Yes, well, do you check whether you have an interest and then come back. Councillor Smythe?
Before this discussion, I was going to query whether we had an interest on that, because we probably see Jenny most days we're in.
The advice which I have from the legal
Is that we don't.
section is that Councillor Vernon-Jackson and Councillor Pitt, as leader and deputy leader, do have an interest, and that Councillor Donna Jones, since she was the leader of the council, may also be regarded as having an interest.
I have no interest there.
Okay, thank you. We will be quorate. So,
I can do it, Mr. Chairman. If you want to do it.
yes, I intend to take it first. Now, members, are there any other interests to declare? Thank you. Let us then go to the minutes of the meeting of the 19th of February 2020, which you have before you, and I shall go through them page by page. Page 1, page 2, page 3, which is an item on the agenda today, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11. Good. And I shall sign them as a correct record of the meeting. Pass that down to. Thank you. Do we have an update on previous applications, Mr. Maguire?
No, we have no update this time.
Is there an update on the nitrates issue?
No, nothing to add to the previous ones.
Thank you very much. We therefore move to the planning applications. I am going to take number 3 Burcoat Drive, Portsmouth, PO5 3UD, which is the 5th one that you will find on page 35. Sorry? Sorry. I forgot to give introductions to the general public. We will do that now for those of us who are here. I'm Hugh Mason. I am councillor and I am the chairman of the planning committee. Thank you for your reminder, Councillor Norton.
Good afternoon. My name's Juliette Gill. I'm one of the solicitors at the council.
Joanne Miles-Smith, Democratic Services.
Councillor Judith Smythe, Vice Chair of this committee.
I'm Councillor Lee Hunt with the haircut, just been done by a very, very nice Bulgarian lady in Albert Road. And so I'm a member of the planning committee and I'm elected to help represent Nelson Ward, which I always explain is Tipner, Stamshaw, Buckland and North End.
Councillor Terry Norton, my understanding is that we're not announcing wards. So, Councillor Terry Norton.
Thank you, Councillor Norton.
Alan Banting, Development Management Team Lead.
And Ian Maguire, Assistant Director for Planning and Economic Growth.
Right. For the benefit of the public, the reason why I'm taking this one first is that the applicant is an employee of the council and is also the secretary to the leader and deputy leader who were sitting there, and the former leader of the council who was sitting a little further up. So we have to take this whilst we are still quorate before Councillor Hunt has to leave at 2:15. May I have the officer's report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the property is 3 Burcote Drive.
Move the microphone a bit closer, Alan. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You can see the property is on a bend of the road, and we're talking about an addition on the north side of the property. Here is an image of the existing side porch structure, and somebody very kindly scored the brickwork for you to give you a clue of where the flashing is intended to be inserted for a proposal in that location. Similarly, for a structure 1.3 metres deep, 2.3 metres wide, and a maximum height of 3.1. I'm not sure there's any other images. Yeah, this is showing the layout adjacent to the porch you've seen in the other images. And this is the last image I want to show you. It's proposed to do it in matching brickwork. It's a wholly acceptable addition to the property in design terms, and will not give rise to any significant amenity impact. So the recommendation is one of conditional permission.
Thank you. Members, questions? Councillor Hunt.
In the back of my mind, I remember somewhere in the past there was some sort of special conditions over development in this particular area, or am I completely wrong? You have to say I'm completely wrong.
No, I don't think you are. I think there are some removal of PD rights in relation to boundary treatments on corner properties. So if it's that you're remembering, I think you're right.
Yeah.
But this wouldn't have any implications for the removal of those primitive development rights, and in any event, planning permission is sought for these works.
Any comments, members?
Comments?
Yes, Councillor Hunt.
So, I mean, they're halfway there already with the little garden and stuff and everything. I see absolutely no reason why they shouldn't proceed and move the offer's recommendation.
Councillor Smythe?
Any further comments?
No. We'll put it to the vote. Those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Miss Edwards has her planning permission. Thank you. Can somebody call back in there?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
I beg your pardon?
Yes, we will try better next time. I am reminded that I forgot to ask you to introduce yourselves to the members of the public. Gerald, have you...
Hello, I'm Gerald Van Jackson. I'm one of the councillors. Am I allowed to say which ward I'm from? No, I'm from an unnamed ward within the city.
Councillor Steve Pitt.
My name's Councillor Donna Jones. I think that's all I'm permitted to say then, isn't it? I've not mentioned politics or anything like that.
Good heavens, no. Heavens forfend. Right, if we could now move to the first item on your agenda, 42 Festing Grove. Members will recall that we looked at this last time, and we required further information before coming to a decision about the number of HMOs in the vicinity. Can I have the officer's recommendation, the officer's report, please?
So if I may, I'll give an opening statement about the data gathering, the question that was deferred for, which obviously will be applicable for this and the following 3 HMO applications before Mr Banting provides you the case-specific recommendation. Members will be aware from your policy we analyse an area of 50 metres radius from individual sites to identify the mix of HMOs in the local area. The main tool for this is a database that we hold and constantly review and update in partnership with the private sector housing team. Within that database is an amount of historic data which we don't have total confidence in. In those scenarios, they're marked as often unknown HMO, so at some point they were flagged to us as HMO, but we don't have specific reason, there isn't a planning permission or a live licence or something like that for it. So we consequently recognise that that is what we believe it to be, but we can't say with certainty when we extract the data unfiltered from the database. Before bringing recommendations to you as a planning committee, however, officers take appropriate and proportionate steps to validate that data. So they would, if there was only a small number of properties, they might knock on doors to have a look inside. If there's a large number of properties, it might be sufficient to simply make an external inspection. You can usually spot an HMO externally compared to a family dwelling house. And we reach what we believe is a perfectly reasonable degree of confidence in the data that we present to you. Consequently, the outcomes you see, 6.5% in this case, 4 HMOs in 61 properties, is a product of that further investigation. We don't go into the great details in the report how we do that data validation. It's obviously something we can do. If members feel that's important, we obviously can add that into the process. But in each case, and for each of the 4 applications you see before you today, officers have undertaken steps to validate that data until we are professionally satisfied that we have all reasonable certainty that those numbers are correct. You'll never achieve 100% certainty because obviously how people choose to utilise their own homes can vary and they have no obligation to inform the council. But as far as it is practically possible, we're confident in the numbers we present in each and every case. Members expressed concern for this one last time. Officers have therefore brought it back to you, and I can confirm this is one such case where indeed we had a planning officer and an enforcement officer knocking on every door that has a blue dot on there to make a judgment on whether or not they are in current HMO or C3 residential dwelling use, and we return it to you with the same confidence we had before that this is the correct percentage mix of HMOs, and I share that same confidence for the other 3 applications for HMO applications on today's agenda.
Chair, could I ask to follow that up? So it seems to me, Ian, the advice therefore is unless we have very specific information about specific properties in there on that map that are not marked, that we could bring to the planning officers to say that actually this is wrong because I know number 53 is, we need to take the evidence that's given to us as accurate and to proceed on that basis. So,
yes, so the reason we publish the unfiltered evidence is to enable people to say, OK, let me see what I can add to it, and rarely does, occasionally someone might say, well, actually, I'm not sure that is right. So officers can then go out and inspect what we know to be the unknown HMOs and any others that are flagged. It isn't that you should then take that evidence. It is therefore the best available evidence, and as any scientific rigour knows, all you can do is judge matters on the best available evidence.
Councillor Hunt.
So I need to tease this out a little bit more. And I hear what you say about a planning officer and an enforcement officer going around, and I don't know how that can be improved upon myself. Unfortunately, whether we or you or any of us like it or not, on social media pages, people are absolutely scathing of the process about determining whether, not everyone, but some people, absolutely scathing of the way that this information is gotten. They allege that the City Council does not look at its own licensing around HMOs, that it doesn't look at its own council tax records, and that the council doesn't even know, the officers don't even know what's on their own list of HMOs. So when I can intervene on this and say, well, it's not fair, you should really wait for the reports, and this was very helpful today. But you mentioned about putting on the process at each and every one of these reports. Unfortunately, as I say, whether we like it or not, people don't believe us, or they don't want to believe us. I don't know which it is, but they just don't believe us. And that may be uncomfortable for us as officers and members, but something has to be done about it. I know some people are never going to believe. What is put up, because they simply don't want to believe it. But on the other hand, they may have some additional information, and I've asked everybody about additional information. Some people have written back to me, but we'll have to try and do something about it. I know it sounds awful, we'll have to try and do something about it, but something needs to be done to bring the confidence to the decision making. I thought we'd reached that confidence, and I don't think employing somebody specifically to go and do it is going to make any difference, because you're doing what needs to be done already. And I wondered if you had any comments on that.
So I've sat down with the relevant officers to look at whether a larger project, which you would have to fund, and that will include employing additional people to improve that data set, rather than, as we're doing now, a case-by-case validation of that data set. So only when we get a circle on a map do we go and check those properties. Rather than doing that, what we could do is go out and check the 4,500 HMOs in the city manually in advance of potentially receiving an application. Now, that's in itself undeliverable, but there may be a halfway house between those two things, and we're currently scoping that project, and I'll obviously be bringing back a budget demand associated with it to the portfolio holder in due course.
And secondly, the other thing I point out to people is sometimes an HMO can go back to a dwelling house, and a dwelling house can go back to an HMO within the class of use. Now, does this affect whether or not there is a yellow triangle, as it were, later on, or in any other place? Because 1 minute it can be an HMO, the next day it might be a ordinary dwelling house. So that is something that moves all the time, and increasingly so with so many of these applications.
Indeed, that is the challenge, why the data we have doesn't have 100% certainty and never will. All we can do is make a point-in-time estimate with the best available information on what it is. Say, groups of people can live together and not be an HMO. Very large families can live together and look exactly like an HMO, but not be. So it is always a matter of judgment that has to be applied, but what we are presenting to members every time we bring something to a planning committee and every time we make a delegated decision is the best available evidence on a case-by-case basis. Whether we say we can do that in a more proactive way with additional resource is a project we're currently looking at.
Very lastly, so even then, if we did employ somebody specifically to do this, they could go out on a Monday, and by Tuesday 30%, let's say, I know that's a gross exaggeration, but by the Tuesday, 30% who are in these dual purposes could switch from one to the other, and it all screwed up again.
So it won't be, obviously that's a very large number. It will never be as dramatic from that, but it will always require the revalidation done by case officers as and when the decisions are made. But what we can do is improve the base data, so the number of validation interventions needed are more proportionate as we go forward, and therefore we can increase the confidence in the data we have. As with any large-scale data project, you always have a degree of risk and uncertainty that you have to manage, and what we can do is try and minimise that, which will be expensive. You need, it's not just one person, it'll be several people doing it as a full-time job to try and clear the unknown, as I've said to the team, effectively the known unknowns we have. You'll always have the unknown unknowns to resolve as well, and the new things that come up since we do the first investigation. It won't just be the following day we could find something and we have no available data because it's a vacant property. Until it's reoccupied, we'd never be able to check that matter. So you're always going to have uncertainty in this area. That's inevitable with any large data project. But what we can do is ensure we have confidence for individual applications, which we have here, and indeed try and improve the confidence in the general database, which is not as up to date as it could be, but we do feel we have confidence in what we don't know, so we can backfill those on a case-by-case basis.
Councillor Smythe.
I feel reassured by Ian Maguire's statement today, and thank you for that, because I think we need to be confident in this advice, and I am. And I would like us to move to a vote on this, since that was the only thing holding us up last time. And I'd like to recommend it for approval, conditional approval as stated in the report.
That is before receiving the officer's report on the... We were all here last time, yes. Okay, so we've all heard the officer's report. Sorry?
Councillor Hunt wasn't here last time.
Okay.
Right. You weren't here at the last meeting, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you for pointing that out.
6 of us were at that meeting. Are you content that we should take a decision at this point, as suggested by Councillor Smythe, on the basis of A, what we heard at the last meeting, and B, what we have heard this afternoon?
Yes, of course.
Okay. You propose, do I have a seconder? Seconder by Councillor Vernon Jackson. Anybody wish to speak? So we have an officer's recommendation for approval on this one. Shall we move to the vote? Those in favour, please show. So that is fine. Those against, please show.
But I wasn't here last time, so I didn't get the evidence.
So you are abstaining. Thank you. So that is 5 in favour with 1 abstention. And thank you very much for expediting that matter. We now come on to 48 Green Road. Can I have Hazel Taylor, Martin Willoughby and James Oliver at the table, please? Right. Yeah. Next thing is welcome, Councillor Stubbs. Do you have any declarations of interest?
No interest, Chairman, and sorry for being late.
And to the gallery, I introduce Councillor Stubbs for those who don't know him. 48 Green Road, Southsea. May I have the officer's report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So, number 48 Green Road, it's a mid-terrace property, and the proposal is for a 7-bedroom, 7-person sui generis HMO. It shows its location on the east side of Green Road, close to the corner with Cottage Grove. In terms of the HMO data, we've identified 8 HMOs out of 75 properties. That required some reasonable interpretation of the number of properties caught by the radius in Home Rose House, which is retirement living, and includes from sort of researching layout plans of the property, 14 within Home Rose House, which gives a percentage of 10.6. So it's already in excess of the 10% threshold, but equally is already in C4 use. In terms of the floor plans, you can see there's a sort of shared kitchen dining area here, 31.75 square meters. I'll mention, although it is not something that's particularly relied upon in terms of floor space, but at basement level, and there's an image to show you as well, there is some other accommodation described as a cinema room. It has a limited outlook and is a sort of darker room than others in the building because it's in the basement. Some images of the combined living space. Some typical images of the bedrooms. Ensuite, rear courtyard and windows to the basement. Sorry, that image there is the one showing the room sort of marked cinema room. So I'll go back to the HMO data. So we'd already identified it is in excess of the 10%, but it's already in HMO use. So there will be no change to the overall community balance. The assessment in terms of any amenity impact from the proposed use. Obviously, there's additional bedrooms up at roof level. I know where I was going with this. This room here is 13.07 square meters. So I'm muddling them on it. Oh, forgive me. I've been going through all of these HMOs, and the story I wanted to tell about the impact from the ceiling heights is on a different one of the applications. Right. So, on large HMOs, the minimum floor space standard for the combined communal area is 35 square meters, and this room falls a little short of that. Obviously, many of the other rooms have in excess of 10 square meters of floor space or close to it, but also have ensuite facilities. So example here is 9.62 square meters with its own ensuite, and this one here 8.33 with its own ensuite. So as part of your judgment, you could have regard to whether on the larger HMOs that have larger bedrooms, it's appropriate to apply the 22.5 square metre lower floor space figure. But what I would advise is that this is already a suitable communal area to serve a 7-person, 7-bedroom HMO, and the shortfall should not be considered to be significant. It would be appropriate for the number of people that would live there, and hence the recommendations for conditional permission.
Thank you, Mr. Banting. Ms. Taylor, Mr. Willoughby, you are making your deputation on behalf of the East St Thomas's Residents Forum, is that correct?
Indeed, yes.
Indeed, in which case it counts as a single representation, and you have 6 minutes, as does Mr. Oliver.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillors, again for our opportunity to represent the 250 members of East St Thomas Residents Forum. We seem to be a regular fixture here, I think you'll agree. And, you know, that's really, you know, I think a reflection of the concerns of local residents about the proliferation of HMOs in our area. As you've seen in the report, the density around 48 Green Road is presented as 10.6%. So for starters, that's already over the limit. But let's not fool ourselves with that metric. Yeah, actually, within the 50-metre range, only 9 houses could ever be converted into an HMO. There are only 9 houses there, all the rest are smaller flats. So actually your reality, if you live in either 36, 40, 42 or 44 Green Road, is that you are surrounded by 56% HMOs. A common problem with these, and I think as the officers outlined here, is when the over-intensive development is actually cramming too much into essentially a small space. In last month's meeting, this committee rejected 2 applications in East St Thomas, both on the basis that they had they fell short, as the officer just said, in terms of space provision. The guidance is, in our opinion, is very, very clear, both in the HMO standards and in the SPD, that for 6 or more sharers, a single communal living space, and it does explicitly say that a single communal living space of a combined kitchen, lounge and dining area should be 34 metres squared, and this can only be reduced if all bedrooms are greater than 10 metres squared. In this application, they're clearly not. one bedroom at 9.67 metres squared and one bedroom at 8.33 metres squared. There is another provision in the SPD and the housing standards document that no bedroom should be more than one floor away from a kitchen, and in 2 cases here they are. So in addition to that, we'd just like to sort of flag the intensity of use and the impact this has on local residents. Now, although these plans would have you kind of believe that the property is going from 6 to 7 applicants, this is simply not the case. If you look at the council's HMO licensing database before its conversion and expansion by the current applicant from the previous C4 property, 48 Green Road had a licence for 4 people over 2 floors. This property now has been expanded to 4 floors with a request for 7 people, a 75% increase in intensity. So if I come back to SPD 20, it says, where planning permission is sought for a sui generis HMO in areas where concentrations exceed the 10% threshold, the council will consider the potential harm to amenity caused by an increase in the number of bedrooms in an already unbalanced community. At 75% increase in occupancy, we argue this is a large increase in an already imbalanced community, and therefore this application should be rejected. Pardon me. Just a word about the kitchen. We've seen some plans here, and indeed the applicants provided some more detailed drawings of the kitchen, which are on public access. If we look at that, by my calculation, and I have to say to start with, there's a discrepancy between the position of doors and windows, which are actually in the kitchen layout, and those in the layout plans. But by my calculations, based on the kitchen layout, there's probably only about 7 metres squared in that kitchen area for people to stand, and I would argue that for 7 people sharing that kitchen, that is going to be somewhat snug. On nitrates, I'd like to make a point. This is an application from HMO, and basically what will happen if this is approved is the applicant will pay a token fee to discharge their responsibilities for nitrate mitigation. That £200 fee we feel is unsuitable and really doesn't reflect the nitrate loads that these applications impose. By the council's own calculations, the actual cost of the nitrate mitigation for the 3 people will be £5,442 per year. Now, given that the applicant will rent this property for around about £45,000 every year, we would like to know why local residents and council taxpayers are having to subsidise developments to create HMOs that they don't want in their neighbourhood. In closing, firstly, the application unnecessarily delivers accommodation and falls short of the space standards. And indeed, in January's meeting, Ian Maguire said, a lack of space in 2 applications because there was undoubtedly a negative impact on the schemes and could be given significant weight. We continue to look to our elected councillors for help to stem the onslaught of HMO developments. I had a canvasser at my door the other day asking if I had any major concerns. I said to her, HMOs were a major concern, and she said, don't worry, that's already on the list. So in summary, this application represents overdevelopment in an existing HMO in an already imbalanced community and unnecessarily falls short of PCC's aspiration for shared accommodation in the city. Consistent with your decisions at January and February's meeting, we would ask the committee to reject this over-intensive development. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Oliver, you have 6 minutes. There's a minute left. Okay, right. Yep.
Okay, then. Hi everyone, again. Although we're just trying to find a technical reason to reject this application, which is blighting our community, this is not only just an objection to HMO in principle, the impact is very, very real. Come and look at the rubbish, the bins on our streets caused by high density and over-intensification of HMO, and it's real. Come and spend a weekend or an evening in our streets and experience the shouting and antisocial behaviour. When the weather gets better, if you're in your garden, I have an HMO in front of me, I have it behind me, I have one right next door, I have 7 people living next door to me, and the impact is real. Please think about the impact these intensive HMO developments have and the legacy that approval decisions will have on the East St Thomas area. In the interest of improving housing quality in the city whilst promoting balanced and sustainable communities, we would urge you to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for miscalculating on my watch. Okay. Mr. Oliver, at last, you have your 6 minutes.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today in support of my company's application for a change of use to allow 7 occupants rather than 6. I'm a private landlord with a portfolio of HMO properties within the Portsmouth area. We currently have over 325 bedrooms. We have 4 full-time members of staff, an office open to the public. All our properties are fully maintained, and extra measures are taken to improve the property's overall suitability for their current use. We understand our responsibility to the local people living close to our properties and the safety and space standards we need to provide to our tenants. We rarely have cases of antisocial behaviour and correspondence from the council. During summer turnaround periods, Christmas and Easter, we conduct weekly inspections of properties on bin days to make sure our properties are fully compliant. We regularly meet with waste management at the council and we push recycling and help students who are struggling in this area. We do not accept any antisocial behaviour from our tenants, and in the event we have any reported to us, we react immediately, taking any necessary steps. The property has been inspected by public sector housing already and deemed acceptable for the occupation by up to 7 individuals. There were no conditions attached to the licence. The combined living space on the ground floor measures 31.75 square metres. It is my fear that councillors today are going to jump on this and use this as a reason to refuse the application because it's below the standard required. Please do take into account that there is a second living space in the semi-basement with 3 west-facing windows which flood light into the room. On the plan it's called a cinema room, but in reality this is a large lounge with a TV on the wall. Therefore the combined living space totals over 50 square metres. The average bedroom size in the property is 11.2 square metres, which is well above the minimum required size of 6.52. Every bedroom has a private bathroom larger than the required space for a shared bathroom. So a 5-bed HMO could have one of our en-suites, and that would have been suitable for their occupation for the students. As far as I can see, and from all the professional advice I've taken with regards to this application, I can't see any reason in the new SPD or the old SPT as to how this application can be refused. Unfortunately, the council database, as discussed in the previous application, has huge inaccuracies, and I question how reliable some of the data is. Several of the surrounding properties have dual usage for C3 and C4, and there is no definitive way to know out of the proposed 8 properties within the 50-metre radius how many are actually being used as an HMO, or how many will be used as an HMO in the near future. I've looked at all the applications coming to committee today that are of change of use from C4 to sui generis, and developers seem to be providing a much larger bedroom sizes and living spaces than that I have seen come to the committee in the past 10 years. Over the last 10 years, many have been overturned at this committee and then been won on appeal. And I do question that if developers are improving standards, is this necessarily a bad thing? Please take this application on its individual merits. The house is extremely large for the number of occupants, and a condition applied to limit the occupancy level to 7 is welcomed. In the event it is refused today, I will be submitting an immediate appeal and looking to reclaim any costs involved. I have a few copies of the HMO licence, which we had an inspection from the council a few weeks ago, and I also have some photos of the basement windows a bit more in depth, so you can see the amount of light that does come into that semi-basement room. I am aware that once I give these to the committee, I will not get them back. Thank you very much for your time today, and I'll pass these across so that everyone can have a quick look at the licence and the windows. There's 4 copies of each.
I would remind members that to hand out documents as distinct from pictures in a meeting is a most abnormal way forward, and treat this with considerable care and caution. Thank you. Now we move to members' questions. Does any member have questions? Councillor Vernon-Jackson, then Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. In Dr. Willoughby's deputation, he gave a range of things in terms of failing the space standard, both for communal areas and also for bedrooms, against the space standard within our SPD. Can I ask the officers to confirm that the interpretation Dr. Willoughby has made is correct?
I mean, the floor space standards are set out on page 15 for you. So the combined living space for a large HMO is 31.75 square metres, and you were told that was a 2.25 square metres below the standard, and that would be correct. But you should have regard to the fact that there is some other accommodation that could be used communally as part of the weighing up of whether this property is appropriate for 7 persons. There was reference also to 2 of the bedrooms falling short of 10 square metres, which 10 square metres is relevant to your judgment around whether applying the 22.5 square metres for communal living is perhaps a more appropriate standard given the size of the accommodation with en suites. But this is all around the sort of interpretation that you need to give to the floor space figures.
Councillor Jackson, a follow-up?
So would I be right in thinking that if you've got all your bedrooms above 10 square metres, you can have a smaller living space, and if you don't, you have to have the bigger living space? Is that correct?
Mr Maguire.
As is always the case with planning, there are no black and white answers. What your guidance lays out is those 2 scenarios which are lifted from the licensing regime as a comparator for where properties, bedrooms are above standard but not very much so, i.e. less than 10 square metres, then we would anticipate that more people would congregate in the communal areas, ergo the larger communal area is needed. Where there are larger individual bedrooms, there's less demand placed on those communal areas and a smaller communal area can be reached. That's the logic behind the licensing guidance. Far more importantly, though, members, is obviously what you're judging is whether or not this application satisfies the development plan. And the relevant policy here is BCS 23 that says what we're looking for is a good standard of living environment for future occupiers and users of the development. Hence, we're inviting you to say, yes, we've got a couple of square metres, 2.75 square metres, shy of a standardised communal living space, but with a cinema room in the basement, in the round, officers are satisfied that does create a good living environment for the future occupiers when using both that guidance to help give you some framework for considering, but then applying the judgment that obviously you're here to do as members. But you're capable of making your own minds up on that matter.
A separate thing, could I ask, Alan? You very kindly said that, I think it was in reference to Home Rose House, you'd taken a judgment about the number of flats that were in the 50-metre radius. What about Home C House, which is also part bisected at the southern end? What did you count that as?
I'm confident that the case officer will have looked at the history on both of those properties to come up with an appropriate figure. I don't know enough about the layout of Home C house to advise you on that. But I know that he did look at the history of the adjoining properties and look at the historic planning records that you've got of the layout.
Just to help, they are both Home C and Home Rose are both properties developed and run by McCarthy Stone, I think almost at exactly the same time, because they share a communal garden stroke courtyard. And if we are, and again, it's taken part of the development but not most of the development into the 50-metre radius. My concern is we're saying there are 75 properties. Outside of the Home Rose and Home C, I think I can count 23. So that would mean that we're expecting 52 flats to be in those 2 developments, but you're saying 14 are in one. I'm just concerned that the percentage of a real percentage is significantly higher, but it's above the 10% threshold anyway. It's just just for future help. it would be useful to have a consistency between how we treat blocks of flats which were built at the same time by the same people and occupied by the same sorts of tenants.
I would point out that there's also some council properties to the north of the circle, the northern part, which would also need to be taken into consideration. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Banting. Just a bit curious as to why the cinema area wasn't included in your. You mentioned it, but you didn't include it in your overall percentage of floor space. Was there a reason for that, or is the necessary area got to be one space?
I'm aware that the committee have had issues before now with accommodation provided at basement level. Questions around whether that would be an appropriate location for including sort of kitchen and lounge where there's limited sort of light and outlook. So this scheme is primarily relying on the higher standard of communal living up at ground floor level and falls 2.25 metres shy of that standard. As officers, we think it is appropriate to consider a component of communal living in the room marked cinema room. But in terms of applying the standards, it is the 31.75 provided by this that you would set against the floor space within the SPD.
Councillor Norton, then Councillor Smythe.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. No, mine was just to see whether you had a copy of this or whether you wanted to see it, because I think only 4 copies. Pass it around. Yeah.
Councillor Smythe.
I was going to ask the same question as Councillor Hunt, and I think that it would be interesting to see the picture of the basement room, because I've certainly seen worse basement rooms than that in the past. I'm curious still as to why you didn't count it as part of the communal area, since the application clearly makes out that it is. And then I've got another brief second question.
Well, our advice is that 2.25 square metres shy of the 34 square metres is something that you could have regard to anyway. But there is other communal facilities that you would need to weigh in the round.
Thank you. I mean, it seems to me that that is something that is an asset to the property, the basement, and that we should take that into account. The second question is, could we have chapter and verse on how many people have been living there up to now? I'm a little confused as to, we've had number 6 mentioned, we've had 2 4-bedrooms mentioned. Could we have clarification on what actual increase there is here?
Well, the grant of planning permission for a C4 HMO is 3 to 6 persons. I don't know how many people were in those rooms or whether that may have changed over time. There is reference, I think, in the report to... No, sorry, it was the applicant that told you that it was 6 persons occupying?
I don't know about this particular property, but I mean, a C4 property can have 6 occupants, so in theory I'm asking for 1 more occupant within the property.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Stubbs.
So just to confirm, firstly, this cinema room area, does it have any natural light? And then my second question is, we've had a bit of a discussion again about proportions and percentages, and I was a little surprised by that, because my understanding of it is that that policy, the one whereby sui generis would generally be refused where there's more than 10%, has effectively been taken out by the planning inspectorate by decision after decision. I don't know how many appeals this council has lost. It's a lot. So I was a little, what relevance does the 10% actually have in the determination of this application? My impression is none at all. In which case, I mean, just as a comment for future, I mean, I'm conscious of office of time. When we're in this situation, is it really worth, throw this to the chairman as much as anyone else, is this really worth using office of time to establish what the number of HMOs are when it plays no part in the determination of the application?
I think that there has been some confusion at all levels about how we calculate the number of properties in HMO use. And I think we need to get this sorted, and I take your point, Councillor Stubbs. I believe we need to get a very clear definition of how this is done and what constitutes an HMO. And I will seek to push that one forward for you, and indeed for the whole of the committee. But as you say, we have been overturned on a number of these by the Planning Inspectorate. Are there other questions, members? Councillor Smythe.
On page 27 of the report, on the recommendations, it says the premises shall only be used as a house in multiple occupation for a maximum of 8 residents. I understood we were talking about 7 residents and 7 bedrooms for single occupancy.
Members, comments? Councillor Bowden-Jackson.
Well, it seems to me we have rules and about what we're looking for from people, and there is flexibility within the rules that say that if all your bedrooms are above a certain size, then we can countenance a lower area of public space, but that doesn't count in this case. Therefore, we're back to the standards that we expect of all HMOs, and this application fails on that. It seems to me there's no point in having rules if we continuously choose to ignore our own rules and give planning permission for applicants that come forward with things that fail. If we're going to do that, why waste our time trying to set rules in the first place? So I think it's absolutely clear that this application fails the rules that we put in, and therefore I'm happy to propose that we reject this application in terms of the space size not being correct.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Hunt, thank you. I would also point out that what you have referred to as rules is guidance.
Okay, I'm sure, but it's the guidance that's given for what is expected of decent accommodation within Portsmouth. If we've got one set of guidance that we give to developers to say this is what we're after, this is what we're looking for, and then we continuously choose to ignore it, then we're sending a really bad message to people who actually stick to the guidance we give people. Otherwise, why on earth do we waste our time producing it in the first place?
Members, I won't belabour this point, but say very much it is guidance. It's to help define a good illustration of what good environment looks like. In this case, what the applicant can do is brick up that cinema room, get rid of it because it's adding nothing to your official tick box guidance. Remove the ensuite bathrooms and incorporate them into rooms, so they just have a cupboard rather than an ensuite bathroom, and then it would satisfy your guidance. And the building, I think everyone would agree, would be worse off for it. That is why I wouldn't, we haven't recommended for refusal, but if you incorporate the 2.75 metre bathroom in bedroom 4 into the 8.33, that gives you an over 10 metre one. Same for the other one that's below 10 metres. Therefore, the bedroom's over 10 metres, and the kitchen is plenty size enough, and you end up exactly the same thing. 8 bedrooms in this property, 7 bedrooms. Apologies, 7 bedrooms in this property, but they are all worse off than this proposal makes. Guidance is there for just that reason, to help give an example of a standard we expect. This quality exceeds that standard is the advice officers are giving you, and consequently you will have no realistic prospect of winning that argument on appeal.
Councillor Hunt, then Councillor Stubbs.
Yeah, thank you. So the communal space standards we have agreed fall short. I'm correct, aren't I? By 2 metres squared.
5 square metres, obviously depending on what significance you place on the additional 19 square metres.
In somebody's bedroom.
No, in the basement.
In the basement level, yeah, as I say. So, but I quite agree with Councillor Vernon Jackson. We have to determine this on the information, the evidence we have available. I'm with him on this one. So I'm quite happy to second his proposal.
Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, we've been through dozens of applications very similar to this one for sui generis HMOs. They've come here because on the most restrictive reading of the space standards, they don't meet the space standards, but at least most of them morally do, because as has been explained, they have perhaps some other usable space, perhaps the bedrooms are well oversized, perhaps there are ensuite bathrooms, some other thing. And we've refused a great deal of applications on those lines, and they've all gone to appeal, and we've lost every single one. And so here we are again with yet another application, which is pretty clear that it meets the spirit of the policy that we've got. I mean, the policy that we've got would allow a 7-person HMO of 90 square metres. This is over 150. You have to really read this in a very narrow way to say that it is not compliant. You have to say that the basement area basically doesn't count at all. And it doesn't make any sense. And I could guarantee you that if we refuse this, we'll go to appeal. The applicant has already told us, and that it will. I think it almost certainly pass, and there'll be another cost award against this council, and it doesn't prove anything. See, the discussion on the last application was really about expectations. It was about people having, quite understandably, but we built up unrealistic expectations of what the powers of this committee actually are. And the powers of this committee are not to determine policy. So, and where we have, things like the nitrates issue, well, it was the Cabinet that set that policy on nitrate charging. No, I don't agree with that, but as a member of this committee, I have to interpret the policy as set by that part of the council. And we also have to be mindful of policy effectively being set through the Inspectorate and appeal decisions. Because the Inspectorate have told us, in effect, that our policy on sui generis applications where there are over the 10% threshold is not consistent with national policy. That's what all these appeals mean. So either you change national policy, or we have to which we can't do, or you have to recognise when we're making our decisions about what the limits of our powers actually are. And this, from what I've seen, the pictures we've had presented to us, and what everyone has said, appears to be a high-quality HMO. Look, if we're going to have HMOs, I'd much rather have nice HMOs than run-down HMOs. And this achieves that. I think it really does, it meets the criteria. It definitely meets the spirit of the policy. I'm going to propose approval.
Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Jones. You wish to speak?
Thank you. Yeah, it seems an opportune time right now as well. Yeah, I mean, look, I appreciate the impact that HMOs have on communities, and I'm sure that every single councillor here has been contacted by residents who are deeply frustrated by the impact of having houses, large houses, but with 7-8 people plus living in them, as opposed to a family potentially of 3 or 4. And I do understand that. We are a very crammed city. We are, very densely populated, and the only way that we're ever going to keep up with any kind of housing need we have is to use properties in slightly more inventive ways. But I do think it's important that we are mindful of the guidance, so that we are not allowing people to live in conditions that are falling short of what we have deemed to be acceptable. I've taken on board colleagues' points around space standards, but I absolutely concur completely with Councillor Stubbs that if we do not pass this today, we will be wasting more public money on this going through on appeal, which I am almost certain it would do. And in fact, a request might be, particularly to the Cabinet member with responsibility for the planning policy for the Council, Councillor Pitt, that it might be worth us even having a little bit of a review of our guidance to make sure it is in line with more recent items that are passed by the Planning Inspectorate, without denigrating our own position, which is also important to have our own identity, but I will be supporting it today.
Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reiterate the point that this really is guidance, not rules. And whilst shadowing my colleagues' comments here, whilst the HMOs are a point of frustration, we will simply lose this at appeal. And I'm not in the business of wasting public money either, so I think I will be inclined to support Councillor Stubbs' proposal.
Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, before we go to vote, I just hope that the planning officers picked up on the fact that the applicant in this case also has attacked the City Council's database. He used words, he said that the Council's database has huge inaccuracies. And this is something as members we're fighting, you know, we've got people opposing saying it has huge inaccuracies, and we've got developers. So everybody seems to use the Council's database for their own purposes. So we're stuck in the middle, and it's not a very happy place for officers to be, nor us. So I just appeal to us to try and see what more can be done to bring some resilience and some support to the poor old database that gets whacked by everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I have taken that on board, and I will proceed with that in consultation with Mr. Maguire, and I hope that we can get something which is quite explicit on that database. Councillor Pitt?
Chair, would you permit a question?
I would certainly permit a question from you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Alan, can you confirm that 48 is sandwiched between two HMOs? In that case, retaining this property, in my view, as trying to pretend that it's ever going to be anything other than HMO is silly, because nobody wants to buy a property that's sandwiched between two HMOs. It's not going to be a family house. In fact, I've been lobbied by residents in East St Thomas who want us to grant them permission to be able to sell their property as an HMO when they're sandwiched between two others, which is an entirely different kettle of fish and not something we're currently considering. But because it is sandwiched between two other HMO properties, it is not going to be returning to being a family house. And I think on this occasion, because it's at 10.6 on the margins and because of the existence of the cinema room, when you add all of that together, it does shed a bit of a different light on it.
Thank you. Any further comments? No, I will then move to the vote. We have the proposal first from Councillor Vernon-Jackson, seconded by Councillor Hunt, for the refusal. Can I see those who favour refusal? That is 2. Those who are opposed to refusal? Want something else? That's 4. So we go to the second proposition, which is proposed by Councillor Stubbs, seconded by Councillor Jones, that we accept the officer's recommendation. Those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? Thank you. Mr. Oliver, you have your planning permission.
At this juncture, because we won't get through the next one in an hour, can I leave, please?
Most certainly. We will allow you to leave. We hope you enjoy what you're doing next, and may I assure you that I have taken the points re the definition of HMOs on board, which you have made. Thank you very much.
I'm not complaining about the offices. It's a terribly difficult job for them right now. Okay. Thank you all very much indeed.
Members, we now move to 130 St Andrews Road on page 21. We have a deputation on this from Ms Taylor and Mr Willoughby of the East St Thomas Residents Forum. Hello, welcome. Can I have the officer's report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So, number 130 is a terrace house on the east side of St Andrews Road, close to the junction with Bailey's Road. In terms of the 50-metre radius, There are a total of 74 properties, 25 in HMO use, so the 33% figure exceeds the threshold, but because it's already a C4 use, granted permission in April 2019, it won't change the overall community balance. Image of the front of the property. Sorry?
Thank you.
Some images taken, my colleague did a walkabout with this one to try to verify the numbers, although, as we've already established, 33% are in HMO use. Series of images of most of the bedrooms. So this is bedroom 1, bedroom 2, 3, 4 and 5. For whatever reason, there wasn't a 6. There is a bedroom 6, but there isn't an image of it. 8. And that is the kitchen diner. And so this is the floor plans with alterations done as permitted development to extend the property for the C4 use, and the proposed floor plans for 8-bedroom, 8-person HMO use. Yep. So you've got some communal accommodation on the front of the ground floor, and they are proposed as bedrooms 7 and 8. Obviously the details of the floor space are set out bottom of page 23, top of page 24, and it is describing the fact that because of the size of the bedrooms in excess of 10 square meters, the appropriate guidance figure to use is the 22.5 square meter for large HMOs. So the communal accommodation here is 25.61 square meters, a little more than the minimum of 22.5. Now, there was concern, I understand, raised at the last meeting around the issue of ceiling heights. And so this bedroom 1 at the sort of front roof space is showing a figure of 12.66 square meters of accommodation above 1.5 meters in height. But a calculation after the issue raised in last committee is the amount of accommodation that would be above 2.3 meters, and that is 7.05 square meters. But it's back to that situation. It meets the minimum size for single person occupancy, but within a scheme that is relying on rooms of 10 that exceed 10 square meters, applying the figure of 22.5 for the kitchen dining area. Perhaps if I just skip back to the image of bedroom 1. Obviously it uses the floor space as well as it can, and but you are then having to interpret, once again, the appropriateness of the floor space guidance figures, because this room would fall short of the 10 square metres above 2.3 metres floor to ceiling height. But having weighed all of the matters into consideration and the sort of usability of that room, the recommendation is still one of conditional permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Deputation, please, and I'll try and be very precise about the 6 minutes at a time.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. Once again, I'll try and keep this brief because obviously many of the arguments here are exactly the same as in the previous application. I think the graphic in the officer's report really almost says it all. Literally, the application site is peppered around with HMOs, 33% in density on the basis of the calculation shown. I say almost, as residents have reported other HMOs in this area which are not on that plan, and we'll certainly collate those and send them in. I think another interesting point here is if you've got very good eyesight on here and you can actually see the yellow triangles, actually half of the properties here are known, and I think that sort of illustrates, sort of this huge level of uncertainty in some areas about what is an HMO and what is not. Now, I have to say, I commend the officers here for presumably going to the trouble of manually identifying the HMOs around the application site, because I think, in the vast majority we are showing the majority of them. However, as we've discussed earlier today, given that we know this is a major level of contention and a major issue of frustration with residents, so I mean, we would urge councillors to take some decisive action to try and get this HMO database in much better shape than it is now, and I'm glad to hear that there are some plans afoot to do that. On the matter of intensive use, so here again we see this failure to meet the to sort of meet the space standards. In this application, as we've heard, bedroom 1 has a usable floor area of only 7.05 metres squared. So the communal space at 25.61 is insufficient. It should be, and it's a long way short of the required 34 metres squared. Also, the other thing worth noting in the space standards, so this is the space standards, it says, and I quote, all rooms should have a minimum floor to ceiling height of 2.3 metres over 75% of their room. So given that the officer's room states that the floor area is 12.66 and the usable space is 7.05, it doesn't actually meet this requirement either. I mean, I think this whole principle of making sure that the rooms are suitable for all applicants is an important one. We can't have a situation, surely, where one of the bedrooms is undersized, and whilst all of the other residents may be enjoying sort of palatial standards both in their room and the shared space, actually for the poor occupant occupying that small room, life is going to be very different. So we argue effectively that the undersized rooms in this property are a reason for rejection. Another key point here, and we touched on it in the last representation, is this has undergone again significant alteration, and the layouts are again misleading. In fact, if you have to go back. When we looked at the before and after, those aren't really before and after. If we go back to 2019 and look at application 19-00286 full, which is effectively the CLUD which was certifying the useful use of the property as a C4 HMO, you can clearly see it has 5 bedrooms. And this application is looking to take it to 8 bedrooms. And, again, we've got an area here of 35%, and we're looking to increase the intensity by 3 people. Now, it was very clear when we consulted in this on the SPD last year, so the residents were told that we couldn't have a blanket ban, but the SPD is very clear that it does seek to reject applications for significant increases in intensity where we already have a very, very high density area. And based on those numbers, 35% and effectively 3 extra people, we would argue that without doubt this is a significant increase in an area which already has a very high density. Nitrates, again, I'll touch on it. £200 is going to be charged the developer here. It's going to cost £5,500 every year to mitigate that. And so, given the developer's going to actually take an income of this of around about £45,000 based on the room rates of their properties, I find it very difficult to see how we believe this is unfair. And I would urge people to look at this charging for mitigation on nitrates, because every application which comes forward will seek not to mitigate nitrates and pay the £200 fee. And this is very going to quickly rack up. Landlords making significant profits off of these properties, they should be being charged a reasonable mitigation attempt, so that burden does not fall to local council taxpayers. Thank you.
Ms Taylor.
Thank you. Just to reiterate the comments we've made before, we're not anti-HMO. We recognise the HMOs do form an important part of the housing mix, but if the council truly wish to support a mixed and balanced community, we cannot keep approving almost all of them in the same 20-30 streets in the city. The invitation to come and look at the impact of HMOs in East St Thomas stands. Think about the impact of over-intensive HMO developments and the legacy of the approved decisions will have on each St Thomas area. The SDB talks about the need for ensuring that a family housing provision is not endangered by HMO developments. This is exactly the type of development which means that the housing stocks will be lost forever as a family home. Specifically for our members living next door to these properties, theoretically it's only one additional person, but again it's one person there, another person in number 132, another one person in 134, because these are applications that are all coming through in the next couple of months, because there's two other properties alongside this one in the same road, 132 I think it is and 140, that are doing exactly the same thing. So it's not one, it's 3, 4, 5, and it just keeps ranking up all the time. In the interest of improving housing quality in the city whilst promoting balanced and sustainable communities, we would urge you to follow the guidance in your own SPD and to refuse the planning application. Thank you.
Members, questions? Councillor Norton, then Councillor Burnham-Jackson.
Yeah, perhaps we go back to the slide with the percentages on there, if we can. Slide 1, is it? So my understanding is 10% is the threshold there, and how have these got through? How have we got 30% plus of HMOs within that area?
I'm just having a quick look at the extract from our database, flawed though we know it to be. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 existing C4s, so when the database was set up, before you put in your controls and your Article 4 direction, so that was 6 out of the 74 properties, so not far off 10% to start with. Plan permission has been granted by our records on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. At some point in the past, I don't have the details of when, actually pushed you well over 10%, and there were 9 that we listed as unknown HMOs that we did the visual inspection of, which may have just naturally have been picked up as existing uses over time. So you're probably looking at something in the region of 15 to 17, 15-ish existing use HMOs in those 74, over 10% already, and then 9 plan permissions have been granted at some point. We don't have details on I'm just looking at what's on the website at the moment. So that's probably the historic background, but yeah, obviously that's happened at some point in the past.
Councillor Burnham-Jackson.
Thanks. I'm looking at the map and counting up the physical houses. I thought I could get to 48 within the 50-metre radius. But Alan, you're saying it's 75.
Because properties, even though they're not an HMO, could be subdivided in flats. So one property on there could be 2 or more dwellings.
So if a family house is already being split, so there's extra pressure on the area by having more people in a subdivided house, that's counted as 2 houses, not as something that's on the negative of saying they've already got over intensive use here anyway.
Your policy is to create mixed and balanced communities. It's not
Yeah.
about intensity. Obviously, that's an issue of congestion and community infrastructure, so on and so forth. Other policies deal with those points. So when you're looking for a mixed and balanced community, a mixture of houses, flats and HMO is obviously a better mix than just houses and HMOs. So again, looking what's on the website, I can see 61 Stubbington Avenue is now there.
It's the wrong application.
Oh, sorry,
We're on St Andrews.
I've got so many of these. So yeah, I'll be able to find, I'm sure, the same in that list as well. So there's a number of properties that we subdivided into.
Yeah. But this was exactly the sort of area that we brought this planning policy in, was to try to make sure that we learnt from this and tried to not to make things even worse for people, because if it's 30 houses out of 48 that are already HMOs, then that's a huge concentration, and the whole point of this is to try to make sure that we recognise that creates unbalanced communities. Alan, could you go to the slide at the front of the house? So this is a small terraced house, and with that photo there's no windows in the roof. And yet this application is to turn a small terraced house into an eight-bedded HMO. Is that right?
This is an old image that I can faintly make out is from Google. The other images were taken when the case officer did the sort of walkabout, but maybe she didn't collect one with the front of the property and has taken this from Google Maps, sort of street view. But I mean, there is a window.
Yes. Well,
because we saw it in that image.
Yeah. At least one of those images is wrong.
Well, it's not wrong. It's at a point in time.
It is not accurate at current time.
If I can help, strangely enough, I know when that was done, and it was done in April of last year. So it is about 10 months ago, and it was done by Aspect Builders, and I know because they were doing some work on my house at the same time and moved backwards and forwards.
I know because I got many complaints from local residents about Aspect Builders and the chaos they cause for local residents.
Councillor Smythe.
2 questions. Do we happen to know how many of those if you go to the map, please, how many of those HMO permissions were given after appeal? We don't know. Okay.
It is unlike, most of those would have been around for quite some time, because we only brought this in. Most places don't have this rule, and that anybody can change a house into an HMO without planning permission. So we are unusual, but we only recognised the problem when it had become a problem in some areas, quite a bad problem, like here.
And second of all, I wondered if officers had any discussions at all with the applicant about reducing the size to 7, if you could go to the floor plans, by retaining one of those rooms as a communal living room.
Now, as always, officers are looking to determine the application as presented. The applicant wanted to change his C4, C3 to an 8-bedroom one. We judge this on its merits.
I'm a little bit surprised by that answer, because that would have made the application compliant, even if we hadn't liked it very much. But it is. I'm surprised that those discussions didn't take place.
For me, that wouldn't have changed the compliance issue. If by compliance you mean it's matching to guidance, the failure in guidance in this case is obviously we've got a couple of smaller. The kitchen diner is below the guidance level. Whether it's a 7-bed or an 8-bed, that fact remains the same. So could we have that same division of the communal space and a third, just like the basement we were talking about earlier. Members would then need to apply judgment on whether an additional space would have made a sufficient difference to make a living environment. You may have come to a different conclusion on balance, but as in each and every case, you have to come to those individual conclusions based on the actual merits of the scheme.
Yes, I'm fairly new to this, but I'm surprised by that because the existence of an additional room makes an enormous difference in any sort of HMO, and I'm surprised we don't count those as being part of the communal living space. Maybe it's something we need to look at in the future.
Comments, members? Councillor Pitt, Councillor Vernon-Jackson, Councillor Stubbs.
I'm going to take a different view on this one to the previous one, and it's because, and I've been consistent in this all the time I've been on this committee, when somebody is choosing to take away living accommodation to turn it into a bedroom, and they're doing that by creating an additional bedroom upstairs that's not really fit for purpose, it's right on the margins, and this is below on communal living space against our standards. That's a choice that the developer's making in order to make money. There is no other consideration to this at all in terms for the developer. The developer's only intention is to make more money from the property by creating extra bedrooms where there was communal living space. If either the living room or the lounge on the ground floor were retained as living space, while they would not in themselves solve the difference between 25.61 and 34, as we were able to with the previous application, we could give weight to the additional living space that was being provided for the residents and take a balanced view. Now, if the person living in bedroom number 1, which is not really ideal by anyone's standards, had the ability to go and sit downstairs in a living room and not have to share the communal space with everyone else at the same time, in my opinion, I believe that that would make this development acceptable. I do not believe it's acceptable for that person to basically have to stay in their own bedroom, which is right on the borderlines of being acceptable at all, and by the other standards not, and have to use that communal living space, which is substandard. So on that basis, I'm going to propose that we refuse this one.
Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Well, this is worse than the previous one. So having opposed the last one, the last one had en suites for everybody. This one is shoddy in comparison. The last one I didn't think we should go through. This is worse. It would be inconsistent of me to do anything except say we should oppose this and say no to it. This is 8 people, and they've got a lean-to as the only communal space. There are no en-suites. We should have some level of respect for the planning officers and for the work that they do to stick to the guidelines that are produced, and therefore there can seem to me no question that this would have to be thrown out. So I'm happy to second that this should be thrown out.
Councillor Stubbs.
No, I'm not going to make my comment, Chair.
Any further comments? Okay, members, we have a proposition that this be rejected on grounds of it does not meet our space guidance. Are those in favour of rejection, please show. That is unanimous. It is rejected. Thank you very much, members.
Sorry, Chair, can I just point a minute? Obviously, you have a issue with the nitrate matter, which hasn't been resolved, which wasn't discussed. So whether you wish to add that as an additional reason for refusal or cover that as an informative. And I would just say you've already made your vote, so apologies, this is too late. I think it is important that you do articulate your reasons. If you are satisfied, I will interpret your reasoning. It is not its failure to meet our space standards, which of course is an unsustainable reason. It is an insufficient living standard of living accommodation. Actually, the judgment you applied, not the tick box that you suggested. So that would be the phrasing that officers would obviously look to be defending on appeal.
And it seems
Councillor Donna-Jones, then Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Thank you very much. I didn't make a specific comment because I was in agreement with what Councillor Pitt said, so there was no point in me commenting. But actually, when it comes to the reason for refusal, and I'm sure that this will be covered in a roundabout way, following on from Councillor Pitt's comments, but for me it really is a complete overdevelopment of this. It's already got a lot of people living in what is a relatively small property. I think they've already pushed it to the max, and I just think this is a step too far. So if you can phrase, if colleagues agree, overdevelopment some way in there, then I would very much support that.
That's fine, and I just think that they've done the minimum in terms of bathrooms, no en suites, etc. The quality of this is poor, or the quality of life for people living here would be poor.
Thank you, members. We now move on to our last entertainment of this afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Willoughby. Thank you, Ms. Taylor. We have before us 73 Stubbington Avenue. Change of use from dwelling house C3. So this is a dwelling house into dwelling house or HMO C3, C4. Since there are no deputations, can I have the officer's report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. As already advised, the application is for a change of use from dwelling house C3 to a HMO class C4. The application site is located to the north of Stubbington Avenue, an area characterised by residential dwellings. The ground floor plan.
Sorry, you couldn't click that.
Yep. The ground floor plan starts with a bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, dining room and a conservatory. So this is the ground floor bedroom. The kitchen, bathroom and the dining room and conservatory. The rear garden is, as shown, there is an outbuilding to the rear which could be used for the cycle storage. The first floor plan has 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. They don't have numbers, so I've outlined on the floor plan which bedroom it relates to. So within the 50-metre radius there are 46 properties, 3 of which are HMOs. So this accumulates to an 8.7% threshold, which is underneath the 10%. It wouldn't result in any HMOs being sandwiched or having more than 3 in a row.
Right, members, questions? Councillor Stubbs.
Yeah, just to clarify the numbers, because in the report on page 30 we've got reference to 3 HMOs. I'm not sure if that's included in the application site or not. It doesn't include the application site.
No, so it's 3 HMOs already there, and then 4 would be including the...
Right, and there's some reference, I think, in the report to one which should have been thought to be an HMO is not an HMO.
Yes.
And so the 3 is after that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, members? Comments? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Chair, we have a policy that says at over 10% we have the ability to say no. This is under 10%. I am keen that we support the policies that we have, and that sometimes means saying no, but sometimes it means we don't have the ability to say no. So I can't see a reason to say no to this, so I'm happy to move the officer recommendation.
Do I have a seconder? Is there a seconder for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Pitt, thank you. Any comments from other members? No? Okay, we move to the vote. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you. That, members, concludes the business of this afternoon. There will be a report on the city plan, developing city plan, which will follow in closed session in 5 minutes.
For which my apologies, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, they're not Lord Mayor yet, but in anticipation, of course, being Lord Mayor, Chairman.
Right. There are certain hoops to go through before I would become Lord Mayor.